Hello. Today I would like to work with you on the Chopin Nocturne in D-flat major. It is fantastically important to sing. And the length of sound is what makes the singing on the piano an illusion, or sometimes some people could say a denial, that the instrument is a percussive instrument and not based on the length of sound, which is not only the artifice of the right foot pedal. It's also how to play the note after the long note that follows at the level of the decay drop of the long note, and not easy to say, difficult to do, especially when you have to have a pedal which in the Nocturne in D-flat major should not hug entirely the melody, so you can hear the melodic intervals, fourth, third, the fourth, which is the octave appoggiatura above, hugging by the appoggiatura the A-flat leap. And then all these expressive accacciaturas, another note for the real note from under, which is so operatic, port de voix, as the French Baroque opera singers called it. And this port de voix could be more simple if it was sung, but and that's where we touch to the most difficult about the good taste of the appoggiaturas, because in a way they are the repertoire's bel canto for piano that Chopin wrote, that operatic singing 19th century style where it's all about the decorative qualities of the operatic voice of the soprano. And often in Bellini and in the composers of the time, the accompaniment will be just, couldn't be more neutral or simple. I'm making it up. In terms of harmonization, inner world is relatively flat country, 1-5-1 at most, so with a dominant and a tonic, tension and a release, but it's all shining on the jewel that is the voice of the singer. And when Chopin transcribes the singing aria on the piano, he uses a more, in this case, elaborate accompaniment of broken arpeggios by drops of the F10th appoggiatura. Now this time it's a ostinato. So like a harp, he delicately perfumes the harmony for the melody, to have this beautiful Klangteppich, as the German call it, sound carpet. And that's where the pedaling I mentioned earlier comes in play, because you don't have a pedal for the right hand and a pedal for the left hand. You cannot just split the keyboard in two halves. It's a pedal for all. So you have to finger pedal the melody by overholding the welcome just enough to support in an imaginary, it's all imaginary anyway on the piano when you try to sing with hammers on strings. It's the illusion of vibrato that bridges between the sounds. The French piano teachers of the Conservatoire, early century 20th, like Isidore Philippe, used to speak about the transfer of energy between the knuckles. Da-dee-da-dee-da-dee. I like to think like the palm of the hand is, for the pianist, the bow of the violinist. And the fingers are the left hand articulations. So the bow phrases. And if you overstay too long, of course you hear it as a chord. It defeats the purpose of the melody, which is to be a lonely sound after another lonely sound organized in a, let's say, thematic material that is motivic compared to the chordal. As far as the chordal accompaniment is concerned, it helps to use the unicorda, the one string out of three, or two in the basses, or one, to create this mystical fog, precise enough to hear the drops and wet enough to hear the combination of the steam that it produces, or the fog. Something mysterious or something soothing, I don't know, and we don't either before the melody. So the combination of the two is difficult because obviously the one nourishes the other in terms of length of sound, also in terms of harmonic coating. Somebody like Schubert in his Impromptu. He combines that in the middle with the bass and the octaves and the melody in the top. Chopin combines the harmony and the melodic note of the bass line in one hand. And the design of the 6/16 notes in the left hand, fa, la, fa, re, are by 2 times 3. Whenever the design of the 6/8 is to do 2 times 3. 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 1. And the accompaniment is 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3. 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3. If he had written the left hand with 3 times 2 on the right hand corresponding for the division of the 8th note 6 a bar, so you have instead of this inner hemiola gives an inner re-impulse on the restart of that wave that is in the middle of the bar while the right hand doesn't play. So you have the right hand stopped on the D flat when the bass note of the left hand replays. And it happens to be a shared F. F for the melody and F for the accompaniment, which is not the same in colors, instrumental and musical. So the F of the accompaniment should be, of course, played on the edge of the key, so it speaks right away because of the action of the piano that is heavier in the lower register, with straight fingers. And the secret is to play them quick, deep, but without the weight of the arm, just the weight of the hand. So they always speak. In the Fauré Requiem, he has the same arpeggio for the Sanctus. In the 6th Nocturne, Fauré uses the same chord as Chopin, D flat. favorite accompaniment pattern, though it's sunk in pedal and it's supposed to be apparently, I would say, lake mirror surface on the top, and then the imaginary swan would glide melodically on top of it. So you don't perceive as a listener the busyness of the motion of the fingers, and only hear the resonance of the sound after it happened. It's easy to say, difficult to do, because the melodic line, it's only beautifully justified by the harmonic coloring. And when we have this diminished chord, and then the dominant, and then the major, but we've done some kind of tension release. And that is very subtly communicated to the audience through the waves of the accompaniment, through the melodic soaring in the blue sky, or so to say sunny sky, bird of the melody, and the combination of the two through the pedal and the finger pedal. How much too much, how much not enough? And there comes the really taboo word in Chopin, whom he rarely, if not never, indicated in the score, but all teachers speak about it. It's almost like a Loch Ness monster. Everybody talks about it, nobody has seen it, or almost nobody. It's the rubato, which means stolen, from robare in Italian, stealing, or disrobe. And that rubato means we steal time. Easy to say again, difficult to do, because where? How much? And how do you return it? And how do you organize your structure? And what is the leap of the octave to do with a grace note? With the release of a drop of these tiers of sextuplets, compared to the apparently unmoved accompaniment that remains, as Chopin used to say, my left hand ignores what my right hand does. Or we were told he said that. That's where the rubato comes in, because then inevitably the togetherness slightly wobbles. But per se, in the structure of the 6 beats, there is no need, and it's not really true, but it's suggested because of the imitation of the bel canto aria style, where the soprano takes liberties with the rhythm in order to embellish with the variations of vocalises, and the orchestra remains distant and accompaniment. Accompaniment in the sense they follow. Therefore, if I have to do something in a pianistic way for this leap of the octave on the diminished chord, that screams tension, sadness, need of release, so if I do, rightfully, some will say, my God, this is too much liberty, he's drunk, or what did he let himself daydream so much? Chopin is structure, Chopin is rhythm, Chopin is music in terms of organizing the phrase, almost like the Baroque musicians he admired, from Bach and later Mozart, who was already post-Baroque anyway for us. But the treatment of the aria in other composers before Chopin for the accompaniment, like Bach's slow movement of the Italian concerto, basically flat, meaning the accompaniment doesn't have waves. Or in the 25th variation of the Goldberg, the archemiolas in that case too, in the left hand, compared to. So you have more notes, faster decorative in the melody in terms of expression, and less notes in the left hand. Even if it has an ostinato with a appoggiatura suspension. But again, I played fast to hear it, to demonstrate it. But in the tempo, unless you don't know it, you don't hear it. Well, you should, but anyway, one is naturally distracted by the melody as of the cacciatura on the downbeat to the next bar after the A died. It doesn't exist a prolongation of the sound in crescendo on the piano like strings, voice or wind instruments, but the left hand for once could be out of its idleness and become the appoggiatura, the vibrato that bridges to the next B flat of the right hand, or then the B flat has to play as a whisper. Does he or she love me or not? I think this kind of delays of resolutions are to do with the Romantic era about expecting more than getting the answer. Sending the pigeon with a little note and waiting for days and nights, hoping to read what the affections of ones are to you or not, as they are for you to him or her. And in a way, in the Romantic era, that wandering, that expectation, that waiting is part of the expression, of course. And so when Chopin indulges, instead of hitting the note just under, which is hinting minor, just because it's a cacciatura, and then in a way, by the time that B flat comes in, it's too late for the storytelling of the melody, because the sound almost died. It's more about the harmony, bridging from the second degree to the fifth degree. That's with the Bach analogy. And I think it's nobody's guess that Chopin wrote it through the piano, not for the piano, even if it's imitative of the voice. Because if he really wanted to have that note sustain, I mean, obviously it's terrible, but it's a very rudimentary solution to maintain the resonance until the resolution or the hope out of this. practicing in freely, freely letting my fancy bring me around. Once I inhabit this good landscape, I have to make sure that I play his melody. So to go back to the rubato, I think that composer's notation is difficult to situate objectively for the teacher who is sitting between the dead author and the wandering student, while both of us, student and teacher, receive the piece through the score. And not all is in it, but a lot is in it in terms of the information, except the essential. And the essential is that everybody has to find, and perhaps it takes a lifetime to revisit a good old companion of life, as a piece like this could be through one's musical life, and perhaps hope one day to find the right balance between allowing yourself the rubato without destroying the structure of the pulse, but avoiding rigidity as well. I mean, again, it's easy to say in words. What it means is that you often respond with your outer ear to your inner ear that read the score, and the outer ear responds to the acoustic feedback that you receive. So if you think, oh my God, it's too dry in this hall, or then I have to put more pedal, or it's too resonant, so I have to take longer because the sounds overlap too much. In the immediate after World War II, most of the famous pianists who became very old after it, and the ones who followed in their younger age, came from lessons where the teachers forbid them, at least in my knowledge of the tradition, to practice or play even at a lesson with pedal. So it obliged to substitute a lot of fingers in order to make up for the pedal, because the pedal was considered an easy way out rather than the pursuit of the impossible legato. Play inside the key, drop quickly, but play intensely with a speed energy of depression that is equal to louder dynamic minus the weight of the arm, just the weight of the finger by the palm support of the hand. So you have a relatively secure, though it will never be 100%, but on stage projection of a whispered sound that is not only beautiful by itself for some aesthetical sort of narcissism, oh, I had a nice sound or two or three, but a meaningful direction of the line, and how you bring yourself to the next line and the leap. So that even if people who know the piece listen to you and don't do that, wouldn't do it or wouldn't teach it, could say, that's also possible. But they might not even think that. Most of them will say, no way, that's not the right way, because my way is the right way. But that's a lot to do with pianists who build their own answers to reassure themselves. Of course, philosophers answer with a question, mostly not because they are undecided, but because they like to wander. And I think the answers are very obvious. Length of sound and a certain emotional drive forward or backward, like I like to say, lean forward and lean backwards in terms of tension of the harmonic component and release. So if that implements one night and another night, it's not right or wrong. If sometimes you just respond to the acoustic, again you receive from the outside ear inside, and the answer is what you want to hear from the inner ear outside. What I call the inner ear is probably mostly sort of like a visionary architectural blueprint of the piece before you start. You just do, and you already heard that sound before you produced it. And if it doesn't correspond fully to what you had in mind, which is tender, resonant, beautiful, bright, possibly sunsetting but connected to the next to come, and then a very deep note in the bass while the melody is so spaced. Okay, and all of a sudden you play and it comes out opposite of what you say. You want to say to somebody the most precious moment of your life, I love you, and it comes out, I love you. So it's at best funny, at worst disappointing, because it sort of negates your intention. And the idea in a piano technique in terms of self-reliance on stage, even on an unknown instrument, because most of the times we don't play on our own instrument, I mean, never. Almost never, for some, I guess. But the point is that we have to sculpt the articulation and the singing, and so we have to have a, I would say, percentage of reliability that allows us to attempt to be subtle. Because if the bass, to speak, is too loud, the pedal is too heavy and too long, the accumulative resonance of the snowflake accompaniment overtakes, then you have to have a soprano that sings very louder to make up for that background noise. It's not noise, of course, resonance. But if you can play mezzo piano, mezzo pianissimo, mezzo pianississimo, and the mezzo being for the intensity and the pianissimo for the whisper, rather than some kind of caress of keys that might or might not speak some. They have some holes like in Swiss cheese, and then start being comfortable with these holes, because obviously when there is so little going on, the list is to hear everything, and if something doesn't speak, it's more obvious. So the technique is to manage to play deep in the keys with straighter fingers inside the resonance, wah, 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 which allows to start the melody in the shadow. And then bring it to the light at the top, appoggiatura, and hope the B flat will last until the A flat. And the A, by now dead, and the B either whispered, but not most people in the hall could hear it, or then willingly forward, a little bit louder, and like corto, slightly dislocating with the bass. I used to attribute it to corto. It's like a little bit of unfair thing to make fun of him, because his charisma on stage allowed it to make incredible effect. Today is laughable, perhaps because the times are less romantic in terms of moods and more into digital precision, and so the idea of dislocating is to do with wandering. So Fauré would write the melody and then the accompaniment. Will have a moment for loneliness of the melody whenever Chopin gives the bass note with the melody, and then the accompaniment displays the harmony in arpeggiated hemiola waves. So if you want to really bring out the melody, you have to play it after the bass. The problem with this trick is that when you do it very often or systematically, it loses its expression. It becomes unnoticed, almost over-affected. So one affect over the other between the non-togetherness of the hands, the accaggiatura, appoggiaturas, delay resolutions of Chopin's melody, the accompaniment notes, basses. I mean, all these elements together, people would say it has to be simple. And to practice that, I search for being expressive on the single note. it's almost frustrating, not almost, totally frustrating. Creating a wave of melodic line. That was the leap of the octave, the sixth doublet, and the triplet. So it's really all about hinting length of sound for an instrument that has quick decay, hinting the line of the melodic meaning, not just the sounds beautiful by themselves in a sort of a vain beauty contest of each sound. In the A flat, it's so beautiful, and the F is so special, and the D flat is so tender, and the B double flat is I don't know what, but probably foreign. Then resolution, but I feel like I'm reading syllabically. Ta, to, ta, to, ta, ta, ti. I-L-O-V-E-Y-O-U. And when you stretch to the point to which you either syllabically pronounce, or in this case, as I mentioned earlier now, in a spelling bee style contest, I still believe that the meaning of the beautiful sounds together in a phrase is what connects us to our emotion as well as to our comprehension. If I say a beautiful love poem in Mongolian language, which is so beautiful by itself, which I don't speak, to somebody who doesn't speak that language, it's a loss, because the sounds might be pretty, but without the connection to the meaning, then the person doesn't know if they receive perhaps an insult or a compliment. And not because you know that what it means that you think it sounds better, but sometimes it's so solacing and reassuring to know that you're loved that it doesn't matter how it's said, as long as it's meant. The Beauty and the Beast, all over again. And I think this overwhelming aesthetic in Chopin's writing of the piano's singing imitation often brings us to think in terms of sounds, colors, resonances, pedal, some kind of a world of the self-serving, narcissistic beauty, rather than through it, once subtly displayed, tell a real philosophical truth. Rather than just tell it in blunt words, but tell it in singing aria. It's fantastic to notice that Mozart's opera arias, if they're frivolous because of the text, or an aria of a mass, he writes the same, musically speaking. In other words, the spirited and the spiritual, the deep and the light mood, in fact all connect. In his laugh. Now, some people thought in Amadeus the laugh was a little bit of irony, perhaps destiny laughing at him, because somehow we try to understand what we can't grasp. Oh yeah, Beethoven. Oh, Mozart. Bach. Haydn. Schoenberg. Stravinsky. And we immediately associate in our subconscious some kind of an image, dissonant, consonant, organization, singing, melody, feelings. Like we dislocate completely the mood and the feeling in a Bach fugue when to play C-sharp minor from Book 1 is a mystical experience that is close to carnal. Even if it looks more austere. Itself is a monodic element. The accompaniment is there in the beginning, and as soon as the melody comes in, even if he or she, I don't know the gender of the accompaniment, is neutral, obviously, well, it's not obvious, but subtly, melody comes in, you don't hear the accompaniment anymore as much. Your attention is on the soprano. Aspect of the whole piece. Just the notation was on paper. Say yes, but he wouldn't have written this, because we are outside of his time period. He composed but also improvised, and so did all the other musicians who didn't consider themselves composers, just musicking. Or a C.P. Bach in his Versuch essay writes about fantasizing, fantasieren am Klavier. So there are notational improvisations, or improvisations that became pieces that people play today, and by the note of the detail return to the original, apparently only free inspiration of the melodic line and accompaniment. So possibly if you learn 1, 2, 10, 16 nocturnes by Fauré, you can improvise a bit of Fauré because you become aware of the different elements of his countryside as a country. Same thing with Chopin. Of course, in the time of Chopin or Fauré, perhaps no more then, but already with the Liszt time, people played music of their own time mostly. Very little of before, for different cultural reasons or lack of libraries in amounts, but also because people lived partly, probably very shortly, and they developed their own music, which was in fact the language they inherited. And so when you play this piece, and the opening note is not F, but let's say, it's not wrong, it's just not right, but it's not wrong because it's ugly. And then you same harmony, but a different melody note. Now, in hindsight, we know it, he didn't write it, so we can say, what is he doing? For me, yes, out of his mind. But at the same time, if you establish the ecosystem of his time period, why not move freely inside it? Perhaps not to perform it provocatively or not provocatively. It's nothing to do with provocation. It's to do with getting comfortable like a chameleon in the background of the wild forest or jungle, so you escape to the predators. So you really are aware of the whereabouts. Obviously, if I play this melody with another note on the same harmony, and I play, then I have to go somewhere. And then every note I reach at the end of the first half of the sentence brings me somewhere else with the harmonization. I like to call that almost almost playing, memorizing ahead, as if the piece existed and you just unveil it or open it in front of you, as if you see it before it was written, but instead of playing what you learned and appear to fake that you improvise it, they don't fake, but you enter in the mood of being improvisatory. That's, I think, much more right than fully recomposing it. And I think because we're away from that ecosystem of his time period, every time we go outside of the track, either because of a simply memory slip, or because our desire to expand in the habitat of the composers, then the problem is today the publishers, the recording companies, the available recordings online. There are too many blockages, some of like self-censorships. Oh, I couldn't, I shouldn't. Oh, what if, but not? And then if you're allowed in a cadenza, in a concerto, you might, but in what and how? It always ends up by being, am I allowed to? And then the teacher should say no, because if not, what's the point of maintaining the tradition to explain the importance of the personal rendition of the notes of somebody else? After all, you're not a killer when you portray a killer as an actor, but you have to be believable. So you have to enter with a mindset. So in a way, being in the improvisatory mindset of an improvised piece is not wrong itself, but we're no more today in Busoni and other lands where the pieces were transformed by the performers to the core. Today they're urtext by the original text of the publishers, and we're a little bit more corseted. We have less, let's say, notes freedom, but we still have rubato freedom within the taste that we determine with our teachers or our recordings. And then generally the whole thing just settles by itself after several revisitations of the piece, and one day you decide that you can play very calm but very driven forward in terms of pulse, to have that same lake surface than if it was a tempo adagio. That it does is that when you play faster, you might not control some of the sounds, provoke an unexpected accent in the melodic line, and all of a sudden that idleness of the mirror surface of the lake is gone. And it's easier to control when you have more time to control each note, even if then you have to still make a sense of the group of notes. Again, the beauty and the meaning and the beauty. Adagio means take your time, or smell every second rose, as Richter used to tell me. Whichever way you want to think of it, you have to allow yourself to respond to the beautiful sunset, or to the beautiful smell of this flower, or the beautiful smile of this person, or to the beautiful, whatever you think is beautiful. And then you respond to it through your playing as a vibrating membrane of the loudspeaker electric waves that projects to the audience the sounds through your inner filter. And that filter should be the most transparent possible, like tone engineering, so that you only hear what you intended again, or what the composer intended through your intention, to create a mood that creates a feeling of intimacy with the audience, and each individual listener feels that you play for him or her, through the fact that you play for yourself, but not indulging, rather mirroring from the composer's inspiration, which means to you, regardless if you are aware of what, perhaps intuitively more than intellectually, both, perhaps with age, could be combined. But the head, the heart, or the fingers, it's in osmosis. It has to become what it is, which is an entity. The accompaniment is part of the melody is part of the mood and the storytelling, and the resonance is part of the length of sound. I want to say that no matter how you start, compared to your intention, faster, slower, louder, softer, with an accent, something that you don't he practiced not for that, and at the moment of performance it happens. Then you deal with the unexpected, and you make almost sense of it on the spot, intuitively. Like the inspiration or the improvisation, it was in the first place when Chopin played it in a salon and then notated it so the students could play it. Or the dedicatees who paid him for it could own it. But they only own the paper, not the playing. And today with the recordings, we own the playings and we rate them and organize them like books of the different interpretations. And I won't even touch with the 18-feet pole competitions. But let's speak about just the fact that it has to speak to the eye of the beholder. So if to you it's an adagio at sunrise, and to somebody is an andante at sunset, what justifies it is not just the individual sound and quality of resonance and here and that, or that and there, or all of that, but the coherence it produces at the end of the first sentence. To say, yeah, I think I remember. And then other memories controllingly add to the first. In E flat minor, which cousin? And a sigh to return. In a way, the beauty of it, not only in the eye of the beholder, but in the eye of the imagination, the inner eye, the inner ear, everything is inner. We're not bound to the storytelling, we create it, and that gives us the sense of either be disagreeably surprised if we don't control our touch enough, either while controlling it, not being controlled musically, but allowing that touch control to release our creative music making within the notes of the composer. But there's so many variables between the rubato, the repeated notes, the pedal changing, the acoustics, the way you move yourself through a given modulation. And whatever this modulation means to you as a performer might not mean the same for sure to the listeners, let less in mass, but individually. But since nobody mentions it, it doesn't matter. You can create sort of daydream sound carpet, and people just start daydreaming on their own while listening to the piece that you serve, while you're a listener plus, because you play. Yeah, beauty in the meaning, meaning in the beauty. Thank you.